Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of I Love This, You Should Too, but this time it's spooky. Ooh. So grab your favorite pumpkin beer and get ready to hear about some spooky picks of the week and what movie we'll be watching next week. How are you, Indy?
I'm pretty spooked because it's the day of the federal election.
Ooh, yes, we do record ahead, so it is the federal election right now, which is a very spooky day.
Look how topical I am.
You're very topical.
I'm so on it.
You're so on it. I should mention that we are a proud member of the Alberta Podcast Network, which is locally grown and community supported.
How about you, Sam? Are you feeling pretty spooky?
I am drinking an Alley Cat pumpkin pie spiced ale, and it's feeling like fall. I'm enjoying the chill in the air and the sweaters I wear to work every day.
Yeah, I like it in fall when you walk to work and you can feel a little bit of crispness. When you walk by the graveyard, you can hear voices whisper to you. All the things that come with this time of year.
All the normal October things.
Yeah.
So because it's October and we're doing special spooky episodes for you, I just wanted to mention that some of our other fellow Alberta Podcast Network podcasts also have spooky Halloween episodes coming out. So this week, you can listen to That's a Thing, hosted by Karen Unland and Elizabeth Spencer, which is a podcast about Elizabeth, who's a teenager, explaining things to her mother, Karen, and Karen tells Elizabeth how that thing relates to something she knows, maybe. Their Halloween episode came out a few days ago on September 30th, and it's available wherever you get podcasts.
Oh, that sounds fun. I've never listened to that one.
No,
I think I need to check that out, though.
I've checked out a few of the Alberta Podcast Network, and I haven't been disappointed by many of them. So,
Oh, by many.
Any.
No, she said
No.
many. She's calling you out.
Any.
You know which ones you
No.
are.
And we have one more new Alberta Podcast Network friend. It's Repodcasting, which is a podcast about movies. So kind of like us, Janet and Lucia are the hosts, and they recast movies with new actors.
I like that.
So for Halloween, they'll be recasting the Adam Sandler movie Hubie Halloween on October 1st.
Did you watch Hubie Halloween?
I didn't.
It's like not good, but it's kind of good.
Oh, okay.
And if we're doing shout outs, let's also thank Lauren Peterson, an artist who did some work on Beetlejuice and many other different things. And she really liked our Beetlejuice episode, and you can see her art at lpeterson-art.com. And then you can buy some movie-themed artwork, and it's a very cool style. I like it a lot.
Awesome. Yeah, there was definitely some cool artwork for the Beetlejuice episodes that I saw on our Instagram.
One of which was by Lauren.
Yeah, that's nice. I like that we're supporting artists.
Yeah, because who else will? Just other poor artists like us. Well, we're going to do a couple of picks of the week where we give spoiler-free reviews on things. Then I'm going to tell Samantha what the big movie watch is for next week. And like she said, we're doing all spooky things this week. But there's one thing I did want to mention. Since we record in advance, especially lately because we're very busy all of a sudden.
We bought a house. Now we have to do house things.
And renovate that house.
Yes,
so
exactly.
We're recording a little early, but this is the first episode since Norm MacDonald died.
Aww.
And I don't really care too much about celebrity deaths. Not like I don't care, but I don't know them. What is it to me?
Yeah.
So they usually don't affect me, but growing up, Norm MacDonald was like my favorite. I, for whatever reason, from the ages of like 8 to 16, was obsessed with late night television. I'd stay up really late and I'd watch Letterman and Conan were my two favorites. I really didn't like Jay Leno, and Norm was always on those. And I have seen all of his movies, all of his stand-up specials. So if you're not familiar, he's a Canadian comedian who then went on to Saturday Night Live, got fired for a bunch of bullshit reasons, and had a medium successful career, I'd say. And I like his movies and his stand-up specials, but if you're not familiar with him at all and you want to check out some stuff, go on YouTube and watch like him on Conan and Letterman, because those are some of the funniest things. one that I really liked was it might have been the very last episode of Letterman's Late Show, and he did a stand-up bit, and then he cried at the end and told Dave he loved him, and they had a little moment, which was really sweet, and Dave hates all that kind of stuff, so it was a little bit apparent that he hated that, but that's all right. And so I guess as little mini recommendations, you can watch Norm MacDonald Has a Show, which is a Netflix talk show he did, where he does interviews. He has a stand-up special on there called, I think it's called Lies, Trickery, and Hitler's Dog.
Oh.
Something like that, but if you search Norm MacDonald, go on YouTube and look up a bunch of his stuff. I'm sure everyone knows the one Conan interview where he talks about Chairman of the Board. That's one of my favorite bits. But he did this one joke on Conan once about a moth. Can I tell? I'm not stealing because I'm telling you it's Norm MacDonald's joke, but I want to tell you a Norm MacDonald joke.
Okay.
And it won't be nearly as good as him because I'm not going to try to do a Norm delivery because it's very specific. And
it is very specific.
I can't do it. A moth goes into a podiatrist's office and the podiatrist says, what seems to be the problem? A moth? Because he's a moth. And the moth says, what's the problem? Oh, where do I begin? I work for Gregory Ilinovich, or any name. And I work all day long. Honestly, Doc, I don't even know what I'm doing anymore. I don't even know if Gregory Ilinovich knows. He only knows that he has power over me. And that seems to bring him happiness. But I don't know. I wake up in a malaise, and I walk here and there. At night, sometimes I wake up and I turn to the old lady in my bed that's on my arm, and a lady that I once loved. I don't know where to turn to. My youngest, Alexandria, she fell in the cold last year. The cold took her down, as it did many of us. And my other boy, and this is the hardest pill to swallow, Doc. My other boy, Gregaro Ivanovinovich. Doc, I no longer love him. As much as it pains me to say, when I look in his eyes, all I see is the same cowardice that I catch when I take a glimpse of my own face in the mirror. If only I wasn't such a coward, then perhaps I could bring myself to reach over to that cocked loaded gun that lays on the bedside table beside me and end this hellish facade once and for all. Doc, sometimes I feel like a spider. Even though I'm a moth, I'm just barely hanging on to my web with the everlasting fire underneath me. I'm not feeling good. So the doctor says, Moth, you're really troubled, but you should see a psychiatrist. Why on earth did you come here? And the moth says, well, because the light was on. Isn't that brilliant? You don't think it is, but I do.
I thought the ending was funny.
But the ending's funny only because of all of that other stuff, right? Like, if a moth goes into a doctor's office and says, like, hey, do you sell shoes? And he goes, no, this is a doctor's office. Why'd you come in here? It's like, well, the light was on. Oh, you thought that was funny, too.
I thought that was funny, too.
No. But I love, like, that he takes you on this journey, this rambling, sad, crushing journey. And then it turns out to be, like, the silliest, stupidest joke.
Yeah.
That's what I love about that. But I'm not going to talk about Norm MacDonald, but I really loved him. He did a lot of really funny stuff, so go check it out if you're into that sort of thing. But we're going to do spooky stuff today, because it's Spooktober.
Spooky!
I forgot from last year. You have to say spooky like that, and we have to refer to it as Spooktober constantly.
Yes.
But before we get into our things of the week, let's thank our first sponsor of the episode, and that is ATB, the Alberta Treasury Branch. At ATB, they make banking work for you. With expert and practical advice in everyday banking and investment planning expertise and management services with ATB Wealth, you can be confident that you're making smart choices when it comes to your money. They have a history of doing what's right for their clients, especially when times are tough, because ATB was built to help Albertans. For more information, visit atb.com, or you can just, pop into any one of their branches. They're all over if you're here in Alberta.
True, very true, because they are the Alberta Treasury Branch. We are going to hear from Indy to hear his spooky pick of the week. Indy, what are you into this week?
Well, I just rewatched the 2019 film Color Out of Space on Netflix. So it's on Netflix right now if anyone wants to go check it out. This is a adaptation of an H.P. Lovecraft novel. So if you're familiar with Lovecraft, well, a lot of people, especially like dudes my age, love Lovecraft. They like wear shirts with all of his stuff on it. I don't think he's great, honestly. I've read 3 of his books. They're fine. I think I like him like I like Stephen King. There's great ideas there. I don't think he's a particularly
They're
good
not, like,
writer.
Fleshed out properly.
Well, so much of his writing, he always just says like, "Oh, and it was indescribable." He calls everything indescribable, but you're a professional writer.
It's your job to describe it.
Take a stab at it.
Yeah,
you know?
it's your job to be describing this to me right now as I read this book.
Also, he's super racist.
Oh.
And I'm kind of the mindset that you can separate art from artists, but I think that you have to acknowledge it. Like, hey, this guy was a terrible person, wrote some cool stories.
Yeah, that's fair.
Because I think a lot of people just go like, hey, that person said something racist, now you can't listen to their music anymore. Yeah. And I was like, I don't know if that's... I get where you're coming from, but H.P. Lovecraft, big xenophobe, racist, all of that, mediocre writer, very cool ideas. So he wrote I think it's kind of more of like a novella. He writes kind of short, not quite full-length novels. So the book may have been called The Color of Space or The Color Out of Space. I can't remember. It's been a long time. But this movie was directed by Richard Stanley, who I know most from being thrown off the island of Dr. Moreau. He was the director of that and apparently had really good ideas. Then he got thrown off and then he went and lived in the woods and then he put on like a dog costume.
I remember
and came into the background of the movie.
Yeah, I remember this story.
So he also might be a terrible person, but I don't know about all of that, so I'm not going to get into it.
Oh, okay. This is intriguing.
But this movie did not do well in theaters, is not well reviewed either. So maybe it's just me that likes it? I don't love it, but there's a lot to like in this movie, I think. It's kind of a throwback to like 50s style sci-fi horror, because I feel like we don't often see sci-fi horror nearly as much these days. Or when we do, it's approached very differently. I feel like in the pre-landing on the moon times, everything about space was seen as much more unknowable and limitless. Now when we see a sci-fi horror movie, you say like, here's the alien, that's him, we can see him right now, and now we're going to fight him for a while. It's less abstract, but I think before people had gone into space as much as we have now, all of the sci-fi things were so much more imaginative because we didn't have any concept of what could be out there. And so anything you put in a movie and you just say, oh, it's from space, people are like, yeah, that makes sense because who knows what's out there.
True.
So you have limitless possibilities of what your horror can be if it's kind of cosmic like this one is. So the basic premise of the movie is there is a family. They live not quite on a farm, but outside of town, outside of a small town. And a meteor lands in their yard and people come and look at it and they're like, oh, I don't know. This could be anything. And in the book, they talk about the color of this blob type thing. And of course, Lovecraft says it's an indescribable color.
Oh, of course. Yeah. Yeah.
But in the movie, it's kind of magenta-ish, which is fitting because magenta is kind of an impossible color when you look at the color wheel.
Yeah.
It's where two ends of it converge. So that's a good pick. And I also like in a lot of movies these days, we're getting this retro 80s aesthetic, but they're taking the best part of the 80s and forgetting all the bad stuff.
Right.
So
you get all the cute like gym shorts and the like ringer t-shirts and everything and
yeah,
and
that
like
too.
The campiness.
I was thinking more in movies, we are getting like the new wave of the 80s and the color palettes of magentas and blues and purples and being almost neon and those being kind of co-opted now into this horror movie. And I think it works really well. And because this force, this color comes from space, literally anything is possible. So it's not like it's an alien, it's radioactive, it's whatever you kind of fear most could feasibly happen in this movie. And I'm not going to tell you what happens in it because this is a spoiler free for today. I'll just kind of talk about potential things. Some of them may happen in this movie, some of them may not. But like in a slasher movie, you know, like you could get stabbed or chopped up. That's what you're afraid of.
Of course.
You know that in a haunted house movie, you can get spooked and maybe grabbed. Like really, in ghosts don't really do a whole lot to the people. It's just the fear of having ghosts there. But this movie creates a situation where literally any terrifying thing could occur. And it's not vampires or killers or haunted houses. And it doesn't rely on any of those pre-existing tropes of, hey, we're used to ghosts, so now we have a ghost type thing. It's pretty original, I think, but they all draw on things that we are already scared of. So there could be voices calling you to go into a well, or it could be the crumbling of your reality and your psyche, or it could be someone you know and trust is being bent to the will of this malicious, unknowable force, or maybe you're turning into your violent father who you always were scared of and feared that you would become like. Or maybe you've gone through illness and now everything smells like death and you just associate the smell of cancer with everything you eat now. Oh. Or it can get into like body horror in Cronenberg type stuff. There's also some really cool creature effects, like non-CG practical creature effects, which I don't see too often anymore. There's some of that in here. There's just such a wide variety of things. And I feel like casting your net this wide often wouldn't serve you well because maybe one thing gets you, but most of them don't. Like my complaint of those American Horror Story shows. Right. It's like, all right, ghosts, cool. And then they're like, oh, also Nazis, also UFOs, also vampires. And you're just like, it's too much.
Yeah.
But this, they all kind of stem from the same point, from this unknowable color or force from another world. Mm-hmm. And if early on you allow yourself to go on this journey, like kind of like how you say you watch shows where, you know what, I just turn my mind off and it's like nice and I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
This is that for me, where if I look at it, it's like, well, why did he actually do that? Let's look at this character real closely. And sometimes the logic doesn't always make sense. But if you give me a premise that says anything can happen because of blank.
Yeah.
Fine, you've made it that world, so I'm going to buy into all of it. So you just have to realize anything can happen because it's from space.
Yeah.
We don't know. But even in a movie that has all sorts of really crazy things going on, I feel like their character work is pretty solid. The plot plods along quite nicely. It doesn't ramp up too fast, which I think a lot of these movies do. For something that goes to, and I don't think this is a spoiler, it goes to very crazy and sometimes horrifying places. And I mean like horrifying, not like it's a horror movie, someone dies.
Yeah.
Truly, truly grotesque, horrifying things happen in this, in my opinion. For something that goes to that extent, the restraint it has early on to kind of ramp you up to that and not feel quite jarred, but always feel uneasy is not the easiest thing to do in pacing of a movie, and I feel like this movie does that well. Also, it has Nick Cage, who I like him better when he's like really caging it up and being ridiculous than even some of his really good performances, but I don't think he's particularly good in this.
Right.
I feel like he plays it sillier than everyone else in this movie, so I didn't love him in this one, but you know, it's still fun when he like goes into a cage rage. He gets one cage rage in here at least.
Gets all cagey.
Yeah. It actually kind of reminds me of his movie Mandy a little bit, but I won't tell you why because I feel like I'll spoil two movies then. Mm-hmm. It also has some similarities to that movie Annihilation that I liked a couple of years ago. It was Natalie Portman and others. And visually, I think there are some really great things in it. It starts off with just a forest that doesn't look quite right. And it turns out I think they shot it in Portugal.
Oh, interesting.
And I think they're playing it as Maine or something like that. But that's why nothing looks quite right. Because I'm not used to this type of forest. And Portugal, from what I've seen, looks quite unique. And then it gets into straight up psychedelic stuff later on that is amazing if you kind of let yourself go into that world. Also, if you're someone who loves hallucinogenics, this is probably going to be a great movie for you.
To watch after taking?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I assume, like, you want to watch crazy stuff. Sam's nodding knowingly because she's like, oh, yeah, I drop a lot of LSD, and let me tell you.
I do not drop any LSD.
But I think it's a fun journey to go on. I don't think it's the best horror movie to come out, but I think it's a lot of fun. I think it has a lot of elements that we don't often see in movies today. It's kind of a throwback to 50s and 60s sci-fi, but with a lot of knowledge of the last 40 years of horror filmmaking. So it draws a little bit on that, but mostly from earlier stuff. And I think it's a lot of fun. Go check it out. It's a pretty easy watch. It's not going to be too heavy, even though some scenes do get a little heavy. But if you're kind of in the mindset of like, no, this is just fun stuff, then you won't be too disturbed. But if you want to get like really into it and are disturbed, I think it's probably even better for you then. So check it out. It's called Color Out of Space, and it is available on Netflix.
Everything's on Netflix today.
Not everything, but we'll talk about that later.
Okay. Sounds good.
Well, then that kind of leads us into yours, which may or may not be on Netflix. Samantha, what's your spooky thing of the week?
So my spooky thing of the week is called Dangerous Lies. It is a Netflix movie from 2020, and it is a thriller. It's directed by Michael Scott. Not
from Dunder Mifflin.
Not from Dunder Mifflin. And it was written by David Gould. So it's starring Camila Mendes, who is Veronica from Archie, from Riverdale. Jessie T, Usher, Jamie Chung, Gigandet. I'm probably saying that wrong. Sasha Alexander, and Elliott Gould.
Oh, Elliott Gould is the only one of those I know.
Yeah.
I swear I'm not a 65-year-old man, but sometimes it seems like it.
You're really coming out as 65 today. Dangerous Lies is about a wealthy elderly man who dies and unexpectedly leaves his estate to his new caregiver, and she's drawn into a web of deception and murder. If she's going to survive, she'll have to question everybody's motives, even the people she loves.
Did you ever talk about this on this podcast before?
I don't think so. So the movie starts with a robbery in a diner, and we find out that the server is the main character, Katie, and the hero who saves the day is her husband, Adam. And the movie kind of really starts 4 months later when she gets a new job and is a caretaker to Elliott Gould, who lives alone in this giant mansion that has lots of like creepy nooks and crannies and kind of looks like it could be its own horror movie.
Oh, I like where that's going.
It's a very cool house to look at. So Katie gets her husband Adam a job as the caretaker of the house, doing like yard work and handyman stuff so that he can earn a wage as well. And I don't want to ruin too much of this movie because it does move pretty quickly, and I don't want to give anything away. So I'm going to say that this is a fast-moving movie, and the rest of the cast involves a creepy realtor, a bunch of unaccounted for cash, and a plot to murder Katie to get the house.
Oh, no. For a second, I thought you said a bunch of unaccounted for cats, and I was like, oh, wild cats.
You perked up there.
Free cats.
So if you're looking for kind of an easy watching thriller, this is one of those ones, like you said, where you can watch it. It's not so scary that you're going to be like anxious or uncomfortable, but it's kind of a fun ride, and it's more mindless Samantha picks.
Nice. You did, in fact, talk about it on episode 58.
Okay.
But I had forgotten all about it. Have you just recently revisited this movie?
Yeah, I watched it this afternoon. I recently got an injury, and so I spent most of the day in bed.
Yeah.
So I watched it, and I had a nap while I was watching it, but that was mostly the painkillers and not the movie.
But it still holds up on your second view.
It still holds up. It was good. It was easy to watch, and I enjoyed it.
And that is available on Netflix as well?
It is on Netflix, and I believe it might be a Netflix original, actually. So it should be on Netflix for a while.
If you want to hear more about it, you can go back to episode 58, which we also talked about Run the Jewels, Killer Mike, and Fruitvale Station.
Oh, yeah, that was
I think that was an underappreciated episode,
you
should go check it out.
It was an underappreciated episode.
We went on rants on that one.
Yeah, that was a big episode.
Yeah, go check it out. 58.
So our second sponsor of the podcast is the Well Endowed podcast by the Edmonton Community Foundation. It's hosted by Andrew Paul and Elizabeth Bonnick, produced by Lisa Pruden, and explores the impact of passionate people who are working to make Edmonton a strong, vibrant city to live in. The Edmonton Community Foundation helps people create endowment funds. The podcast tells the stories of how those endowments intersect with the community. So you can subscribe to the Well Endowed podcast at thewellendowedpodcast.com. Well, Indy, we've come to the spookiest part of the episode,
where we have to spend all night in Old Man Johnson's haunted house.
No.
Oh.
I think that's a different podcast.
Let's do that. We should do our spooky episodes from haunted places.
Sure. You find some haunted places and we'll podcast.
I know some haunted places.
Okay, let's go.
Maybe not today because, we're pretty much done.
And I'm a little bit housebound today. So, Indy, what are we going to be watching this week?
So for next week, we are going to be watching the Spanish film. In English, it is called The Orphanage, or in Spanish, El Orphanato.
Oh, I like your Spanish voice.
Well, usually I do the lower voice because when I was learning Spanish, I listened to a certain speaker. So now everything I say sounds like, una mesa para dos personas, por favor.
I did enjoy listening to you learn Spanish because there's like the talking out loud part, and you just totally mimicked the guy. It was very funny.
Ha ha ha.
Oh, now you laugh like that too.
See. Maybe you'll hear more of that when we talk about this episode next week.
Yes.
Or this movie next week. So, The Orphanage was from 2007. It is in Spanish, and it's described as a gothic supernatural horror film. And it's the first film from that director, J.A. Bayona. And he's gone on to do big things. I think he's done like a Jurassic Park movie and is going to be doing that Lord of the Rings TV show when it comes out, and a few other big ones as well. But he got big time. But this is a very impressive debut. It's mostly an atmospheric type horror movie, because this is the type of movie that I feel actually scares me. I know everyone's scared by different things, but the things that scare me are haunted house ones when they are pretty slow moving and you usually don't see, like, here's a big monster and you're running from it. When I see something, it kind of takes the magic of the fear away. Like, I love Friday the 13th movies. I think they're a lot of fun, but I'm not actually scared of Jason Voorhees.
No.
Right? He's just a big guy. If I was there, I'd just run faster than him and I'd be fine. Or also, I'm like, yeah, he doesn't exist, so I'm cool with it. Even serial killer movies, although that's much more plausible to our real life than being in a haunted orphanage, those ones don't really scare me.
Oh.
Things that scare me are the ones that take the time to build an atmosphere. So you're kind of just always on edge. And like Color Out of Space, but on a much smaller scale, it has that slow ramp up to things being truly frightening.
Interesting.
So I'm not someone who really cares about jump scares. I feel like they're usually cheap.
I don't like jump scares.
But they work on you.
Yes, because
they work on you amazingly well. So
As
much
someone...
so that if I walk into a room without announcing my presence for like the last 30 seconds, you will be very scared.
Yeah, I definitely screamed this weekend when you entered.
I like sneeze too loud and you scream from that.
Yeah, I'm a baby.
But this movie, I don't want to give away anything because we're going to be watching it and talking about it all on next week's episode. But I will say that it's a atmospheric movie. It doesn't rely on gore and jump scares. There may be one or two. I can't remember any, but if they were, they're not like the point of the movie.
Okay. I'll still scream though.
Yeah, that's fair. There may not be any, but I feel like in every horror movie there's something that's a little bit of a startle like that. And so the premise of this movie, there is a woman named Laura. She grew up in an orphanage. Now she is married, has a child of her own, and is trying to give back to that community. So she purchases the orphanage that she grew up in, and she's going to start running it for all sorts of other kids and try to help them like she had been helped.
Oh,
So that's all lovely, right?
that's nice.
And then things take a dark turn.
Ah! No.
And I think that's enough of a build-up of what this movie is about. Because you can kind of picture big old building, things might get a little spooky.
That's already scary to me.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, it's such a, like, weird premise, I guess, that it kind of already seems scary.
So many horror movies, even if they're not really like a haunted house movie, they start with someone moving into a new house. That's so big on, like the one you just talked about, that's a big part of it, right?
Yeah.
Color Out of Space, actually, they are kind of new to that place as well. The Shining, they're going somewhere new. Every haunted house movie, your Sinisters and things like that. That's a big part of it because, well, I think as we know, moving is scary.
Yeah.
And it's kind of upsetting your whole world, right? You're
True.
restarting everything. You don't know what goes where. You don't know what's behind every door. And I think a lot of movies maybe even subconsciously draw on all of that.
Right.
And this is definitely one
Yeah,
of
there's
those.
this certain, like, anxiety and fear of the future when you're moving.
I already think when we spend our first night in our new house, it's going to be weird.
It is
Like,
weird.
that's not our house.
I remember
But it will be.
my first night alone here in the condo that we are currently recording in,
Mhm.
which I bought about 5 years ago. I remember that being scary to me.
So this one might be a little harder to find because it's not on Netflix, or at least in Canada, but check where you are. It is something that is available to rent from Amazon or YouTube or pretty much everything
All
like
those
that.
places that have rentals, yeah.
There are like a bunch of other movies called The Orphanage. It's not those. It's from 2007 and it is in Spanish and it's called El Orfanato in the original cover art and things like that.
Right.
Also, if you're really having trouble finding it, ask me. I can probably hook you up in some way or another. I do know for a fact that all of you Edmontonians can get it at your public library.
Oh, I do love a good public library shout out.
And it will have my staff pick sticker on it.
Yay! Is there only one copy?
No, there are, I'm not sure how many. At least one of them has my
Okay.
sticker.
Well, if you find it, send us a picture of you holding it up with Indy's name on it.
Oh yeah, that'd be pretty funny actually. Well, normally we would do a trailer, but the trailers aren't in English, and the ones that are in English are seemingly describing a different film because they're making
you
it.
watched one and you were like, "That's not how the movie. That's not in the movie. What is this?"
They made it look like some home invasion by ghosts, and it was like she's running around and things are chasing her, and that doesn't happen.
Oh.
It's a nice, slow, quiet movie. It's a little sad as well. It's, I think, an emotional movie, but still maybe not the most complex. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but usually when we're talking about a horror movie, especially one of my picks, and I go on about, like when we watch Halloween, I have to say like, well, this is a metaphor for the time.
Yeah.
Like this was the 1970s and it's full of all this uncertainty. I think this is just a good spooky ghost story.
Oh, okay.
So you won't have to hear me theorize about what this all means. Well, I probably still will a little.
You will.
I'll try. I won't much.
We know you well enough at this point.
That's very true.
There will be theorizing, and it will be very in depth.
Well, if you look at it, Guillermo del Toro's earlier stuff, that is very much like representative of the Spanish Civil War. But he is a producer on this and also has a small uncredited role. So you can see Guillermo del Toro being a doctor.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we will watch The Orphanage this week, and we'll talk to you again next Monday when we talk about this movie and how scary it was.
And remember, if this is your first time, next week will be all spoilers and we'll get really in-depth about just the one movie.
Yes, and then the week after we will find out what I will be bringing to the table to spook Indy.
Oh, I'm gonna get so spooked.
So spooked, but in like a fun way.
So spooked.
An uplifting spook.
Oh, yours is an uplifting spook?
Yeah.
Okay, then mine is what's the opposite? A down-pressing?
Yeah.
Down-dropping spooked.
Yeah. A real soul crusher.
Yeah, you're gonna get down-pressed on this one, and then you'll get uplifted for the next one.
Perfect. This is the whole point of the podcast.
Yeah. to down press and uplift.
Exactly.
I'm gonna start. I got down pressed.
Oh, so damn
I
pressed.
got pressed down.
Okay, well, we'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
So, Indy, spooky time.
Did you call me Spooky Time? So, Indy Spooky Time?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's your new nickname.
Indy Spooky Time. I
Yeah.
like it.
Randawa was too boring. Now you're just Indy Spooky Time.
That's great.
And then we're going to get married and we'll be Mr. and Mrs. Spooky Time.
I am all for that.
I actually like that. Okay, we'll revisit that later.
I will go back to being a teacher so I could be Mr. Spooky Time.
Yes.
Wait, what was the question?